What's up, everybody? I want to speak to you about what I believe is going on in our country that genuinely I find disturbing in the divisions and the racial divisions that are beginning to surface. And so perhaps maybe the purpose behind my own conversation today is to speak about Afrikaans, what it means to be an Afrikaner, and what it means to be a South African within that context. And so maybe in some ways, this is my own conversation with citizens of this country to say, when we set out to build one South Africa, that does not necessarily mean that we ignore certain truths, certain realities, and that we realize that we are in one country and we all possess one passport. Let me highlight a few things. Let me speak a little bit about the language of Afrikaans, given that we've been talking about the International Mother Tongue Day, etc. The thing about 1994 is that it allowed Afrikaans as a language to remain. And I think that was an important thing. It's a recognized language in the Constitution. It exists. There are certain schools that only teach in Afrikaans. And Afrikaans is spoken by more people beyond just white South Africans. It's spoken to by more people. There are many Afrikaans-speaking South Africans who are not white. I want to say this up front, that I grew up, when I was in primary school, one of the poems we had to learn was D-Stem. And it was the national anthem. I grew up resenting Afrikaans. There are still days where I wonder why, even for my children, some of them, they have to do a second language in Afrikaans. I had to do second language Afrikaans. And you had to pass it. So I had every reason to resent it. It was the language that was used so much symbolically to oppress. But I would still, given the challenge of 94, maintain the right for Afrikaans to exist. But I would maintain it that Afrikaans mustn't exist only for Afrikaners. It must exist as a language that is broader, that is more inclusive. Which moves me to my second part, which is, what does it mean to be in the history of our country an Afrikaner? There are some who, and many Afrikaners in this country, or people who are South Africans who want to contribute to this country. There are South Africans who say, we've only got one passport and we need to make this country work. There are those South Africans who equally so are enjoined by the same constitution that governs me, that says we recognize the injustices of the past and therefore do everything to address that. I want to speak to that Afrikaans-speaking South African and say, believe you me, when we talk about building one South Africa, I want to know and believe that you are a part of that. You contribute. Maybe my own personal story, when I finished school, I lived for some of the time when I was studying with an Afrikaans family that were doing an incredible work around looking after young people who had been abandoned. It was well within that context that you begin to appreciate maybe some of the similarities or the differences. Okay, probeer, you learn the language. But these was also South Africans who said, I recognize that our past was devastating. They are not sitting around telling people that the evil of apartheid must be confirmed or must be compared to the incompetence or the corruption of today's government. They recognize that apartheid was a crime against humanity. That it does not matter how corrupt the system could become, we would dare never return to apartheid. Because apartheid was evil. It produced killing squads. It split families. It told other citizens that they were less than. Now, when I hear people today say, well, the failures of today's government must mean somewhat that we must celebrate something about apartheid, I become deeply concerned. Because it not only misses the point about saying how evil that system was, but it forgets the triumph of 94, that whilst others wanted retribution, whilst there could have been evil in this country, citizens came together to build together. Citizens made the choice that our future is shared. And in some instances, for many of those who were already working within the system, were able to flourish. It opened up borders internationally. It allows businesses that were Afrikaans old to now trade everywhere in Africa and all over the world. Yes, it was a triumphant moment. Yes, there are others who will say it was a betrayal. It was not. We confronted then, or South Africans who led at the time, confronted then the reality as they had it in the day. And it wasn't a reality that said war is preferable. It wasn't a reality that said one side must win for another side to lose. It was a reality that said we must face the truth and we must reconcile and we must work together, because it was a draw in some ways. Now, I don't deny there have been profound failures in the last 30 years. But let me tell you, I, as a person, I have seen my life also get better in the last 30 years. We had many multiple home affairs. Now we have a singular one. We had multiple education systems. Now we have one. You might say it's not good. I agree it's not good. But at the end of the day, it gives opportunities to all South Africans, and therefore we must use that. We're still dealing with some of the legacy issues of spatial network, where infrastructure in certain townships that were declared before 94 is aging. You might make the case to say it should have been maintained. And yes, I agree, it should have been maintained, but it was a legacy we are now trying to address. So what do I want? Of course, I want a government. I want a government that is competent. I want a government that will keep the trains running. I want a government that will fix the hospitals. I want a government that will do that. But I want a government that will do that for all South Africans, not for some. I want a government that says the Constitution is applicable to all. I want a government that says we don't steal people's money, that we serve all citizens, and we've got to make sure all citizens try and prosper together. I want a government that says when we address the injustices of the past, it's not punitive in that you want to punish the other. It's that you skew resources towards fighting for justice. And I genuinely believe there are many Afrikaan South Africans who want to be a part of that. They recognize the fact that for Afrikaan schools, they want to make it possible for more citizens to come and learn in the same schools, not to have schools exclusively for one language. They recognize the fact that even at universities, we should have PhDs, not only in English or Afrikaans, but in multiple languages. True freedom is when actually all of us can prosper together. Which brings me to the third thing. AfriForum. Let me be clear. I think what AfriForum is doing as I explained it to a friend of mine, to say, you can use the United States as this big arsenal that you can influence to punish and fight your battles. But I think actually at its core, what you are trying to do is create an environment where your narrative can eventually deliver a South Africa where you believe there must be a special or a separate development for Afrikaners. Now, I want to speak to what AfriForum is doing. Have we, as a country, adopted policies that are not pro-growth? Absolutely. Should we invest more in infrastructure so we can grow? Absolutely. Is there genocide taking place in this country? Absolutely not. Is there an illegal seizure of land in this country? Absolutely not. All of those things are true. To now go out and distort the truth, to say things are worse today than they were during apartheid, there's a genocide, there's seizures, I disagree. I think what you cannot do is use the US to drive a particular narrative that is destructive against our country. And I think, as I listened carefully to Rolf Meyer speak the other day on television, You do not represent all Afrikaans-speaking South Africans or all Afrikaners. I think what you are trying to do is create conditions upon which the idea of separate development seems palatable. That there must be special treatment or something. I want to invite you, in order not for us to sow divisions that are racial, I was speaking to a leader of a political party that is predominantly Afrikaans. And I was proud to hear when we spoke that they are not represented by AfriForum. What we have to do is come back and say, we have an interest in this country. We have a democratic process upon which we can fight for policies that are pro-growth. We need to learn lessons about how we can build an economy that's more inclusive. We have to achieve a country upon which all rights are protected and we can grow. And that's a journey. But when you go out and you create a false narrative that becomes punitive to people who are HIV positive with the withdrawal of PEPFAR funding, punitive to job losses in this country when AGOA is removed, I don't think you are being patriots. I think actually you are doing something profoundly destructive in this country. Because it is your personal views and your organizational views, but they are not the views of all South Africans. Because frankly, black, white, Indian, colored, English, Afrikaans, Tswana, Sizulu, Chitsonga, all the languages, South Africans actually want to work together. So I'm offering this free invitation to you. Either get on board, but if you're not willing to get on board, let us stop sowing seeds of division. Our country can ill afford it. It's why, even as difficult as it is, we still have the stem as part of the national anthem. We still have representation of all South Africans in whatever we go in our sports teams everywhere. And yes, there have been moments of racial division, etc., but they don't speak for the majority of the people of this country. My call to you is let's build one South Africa. Honestly, I think the beautiful thing, and I want to appeal to you as a Christian, our nation, the sin of apartheid was because we recognized that when God created all men, he created us all equal. And there were many South Africans who realized that in their faith, they could not betray their faith by practicing apartheid. And I think for all of us, as Christians, as people of this country, we believe that to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, to quote an aspect that comes from the American Constitution. But it truly originates from our view of creation. So I call upon you, let's rather stop this masquerading of truth, and let's all get in this South Africa, find policies of growth, work together, and let's prosper together. Our nation needs that. May God bless South Africa and all her people. Bye, Danke.